this is important. So it's this array tool, right? Array basically allows you to copy stuff in specific ways. Now this is close to the end of all of these tools here. These we get into, but they're really not as extensive as these up here. And then I want to show you some layers and some other stuff, tidbits. But let's go ahead and make a polygon. Remember, that's up here under rectangle, it's polygon. So we'll make a polygon. Right now, I'm feeling like using the number 9. So I'm going to use 9. And I'm going to make this right here. It doesn't matter for inscribed or circumscribed, the point will still get across. So I'll just make one. Okay, so we've got this cool thing here. Now, what if I want to make a bunch of them in a certain rectangular direction? So within 90 degrees, like a grid, right? Like imagine if you had this on an XY axis and you wanted to repeat it every 1 inch in each direction. We are totally allowed to do that, and it is awesome to know how to do that. So let's copy this. Let's copy this, and we can click array. You can just click this. By default, it'll go to the last one you had. When you open up AutoCAD, it'll go to rectangular. But let's check these out. So we've got rectangular. Now, these tools are great, but the array one's a bit more detailed, so it's got this extra tab that shows up to help you figure out how you can use this. So there's a lot of stuff here. I'll start out with, let's do the stuff that you can interact with directly. So the end arrows, the terminating arrows, will tell you how many rows are involved. This will tell you how many columns. And this one doesn't do either. It's kind of like you can edit both of these at once. But if I were to click this and drag, you'll see it will make more rows. Make more rows. This one will make more columns. If I click this, you can do both at the same exact time. And this one you don't really need any reference geometry. You can kind of just count because it's not like, doubles. They're not like floats or decimal based numbers. They're just they're whole integers. They're whole integers. So I'll just do this for now. These lines here, you will see it tells you the distance, because it basically, what it does is it copies one to the top, one to the side, and then uses that information to replicate it amongst a whole grid. So this is the distance between elements in the vertical direction, distance between rows. So I can click it and I can drag. I can do the same thing for this way. Now you can see here when I do this, it'll go from the reference that I was just at. So you can do all this stuff, but it's easiest to go up, it's easiest to go up here and edit all this stuff. So let's say I want 20 of these, and the way I want to do that is I want to have 5 columns and 4 rows. So let's see. I want 5 columns, enter, and 4 rows. Now you see, if I just change this, it won't change anything right away. You have to press enter. So that would be 2, but I want 4 because 5 times 4 is 20, and that's how many we want. So what we'll do next is you can have this distance between them, which is, this is the between distance, and this is the total length. You can set either of those, and it will kind of figure out how to space everything out evenly. The thing about arrays is that they're copies in order, so they're all in even spacing. Same thing for rows. This levels is basically the same thing as this, just in the Z direction. I'll go ahead and press enter and do this, and I'll show you that. If you remember, I showed you this, there's a 3D workspace here. We just work in the XY because the Z direction 3D dimensional stuff in AutoCAD is not super awesome. I'll go over it at the end probably just a little bit, but we'll focus on the XY. But that's what that means in case you're curious. So you can click back on here to bring that menu up. I won't be messing with levels, but I'll show you what these options mean. The base point refers to this this on, imagine it's like XY, you can change the coordinates for that, or the reference for it. So if I were to click here, you can see it's right here. I click here. You can see now it's with reference to here. That might be better in case you have a specific part of a drawing that would easily show where you want all this stuff. Because remember, you can also click this to a specific point. So you can click this to a specific distance. So maybe if you were to adjust this to a part on a big line, then you could click this to an intersection of another line. You can click Edit Source, which will allow you to edit the source array. I will select this item. You can click OK. It's basically saying that you want to edit it. And you'll see all of these are referenced by that. So if I create a circle inside of here, it's on all of them now because they're all related. It's called that they're, well, not called, but the relationship there is that they're all associative to each other. It's an associative array. So each element is based on the very first one you created it from. That's important because you can actually break all these apart with the explode command once you make it, and then you can edit them individually. Anyway, so we'll just go ahead and enter this again. Okay, so you can edit the base geometry there. Yeah, you can edit the source geometry. And it should change the rest of them, and you should be able to save it just as easy and go from there. Although I'm not quite sure why it's not letting me save that to all of them. I think that what it does is it just highlights the base one, but they're all referenced from that, so it should work all the same. Generally though, you want to just have it correct before you array it. So the last thing I want to show you guys on here is nothing actually. So we'll close this array, and that's how you make a rectangular array. You can drag this the other way to flip it the other direction, and you'll see if you look up towards, I want to say it's where you have rows, they have now become negative. So you can enter negative numbers or just drag it the other way and do that. This is based on an XY system, so that's why those signs will be that way. Okay, so the next tool that we'll go with is we will do the path array. That one, it will be pretty quick. Let's first make a spline line, because the way this works is you give it a path. Instead of being a rectangular thing, you give it an organic path, and it will copy along that path. Okay, so what am I doing? So we'll make a spline line like that. Right click, enter. Now let's say I make myself a circle like that. Maybe it's too big, so maybe we want to scale it down just a tiny bit. Okay, now let's say we want these to go all along here. So what do? We do that kind of array. We do this path array on what object? This object. Select it. And this is the curve we're going to select. So you'll see it'll do its best to put them offset from here. But honestly, that's not the best thing. So we can check, we can select base point, and it will start from the beginning of this whole array. Or not array, my bad. It will start from the beginning of this whole spline line at wherever the point is. So you'll see if I click this, it'll snap it to that. If I were to change the base point to, let's see, where is it? If I were to change the base point to like here, it would do that. But I don't want that. I want them in the center. So we go back to the tool. You can do a couple things. Just like the other one, you can click this and extend the numbers that you want. You can basically, it will fit as many as it can on there until they start to fall off. And you can see on that last one, it will go all the way up until that same center point goes off the edge of that. So it'll get really close, and then I go and it won't go to another one. I was talking about that right here if you want to back up the video if you didn't catch that. The other thing you can do is you can measure. So you have these same type of controls up here as the other array. If you select divide, it will give you, some of these are not available. It'll give you access to the number of items. So there are 4 on there. Maybe I want 8, so I do 8 and enter. It will space 8 on there as best it can. From end to end, spacing in the middle. So if I do 10, you see this end one doesn't move because it's spacing more of them in between the initial and final points of this line. So from there, maybe you want to actually have a certain distance in between them and then go from there, this distance. Well, now this has become available, so maybe you want to click 8. And the distance between these will now be 8. Not as a straight line, but as the line along, or the distance along this path. It'll do that as best as it can. You can change the direction. So if this is like on something else, you can flip the Z direction. Oh wait, my bad, that's the Z direction, so that's up and down, so we're not worrying about Z. You can edit the source the same way. That'll allow you to edit the primary part that's being replicated. And you can have different rows. Let's say we had 2 rows. What it'll do is it'll extend it out. It'll extend it out tangent, as you'll see, to the beginning point of that line. So maybe you have them out here, it'll extend them that way. This is a little prettier though. But honestly, I don't want that at all. So I'll go here and I will tell it to have a single row. And you have the same thing where that's the distance between in total for the distance in between these, or the total distance that you want and how many elements you want in between. So now we'll go ahead and close this. That's pretty straightforward for that. We're going to do the last array type, which is blend curves, and then yeah, we'll just keep going from there. At this point, the video is pretty long, so this will probably end up being in part 2 of the video. Not sure when they'll split it, but they'll probably split it up into 2 videos as best they can. So we're going to now do a, not that one, my bad. We'll do a polar array. Now this is basically the same type of thing, except being on rectangular, it's going to be on a polar coordinate system. So you have concentric circles and it's going to be based on that. So let's make some cool stuff. Let's say we have, what do we want to make? Let's make a polygon. And we'll give it 6 size, octagon. We'll do just a small one so we can have a good workspace, and we will start making our array. So you can click this array, polar, and select the objects. It'll ask you to. Right click, select the center point of the array. So you're going to be on a polar coordinate system. You need to know where it's going to rotate these around the center on one of those concentric circles. So let's click here. And you'll see it'll make elements around these in a circle. There's a circle that goes through all of these points. So now what we have is we're going to have this be on the number of elements that we want, the space between them, or the degrees, because it's polar, and the amount of space that we want to fill, the amount of full degrees we're going to divide upon. So let's say we have 6. We could change it to 4. Change it to 7. The degrees between, it will automatically determine how much space you want between this, basically by dividing 360 by that. So if I had 6, you'll see it'll be 60. 360 divided by 6 is 60. However, you can change this. So if you were to change this to 70, you'll see it'll do that. Or what's better is let's go less than 60. Let's go to 50. So you can see it will now have 50 degrees between this line and this line. It'll read 50 degrees. So you can do that if you want to subtract from the whole array. What you can also do is you can say, you can give it you can specify any of these. So let's say you want to specify 300, or oh my god, that's a lot of degrees. 300 degrees. and you only want to have 3 items. So it's difficult to see, but if you highlight this, it'll show you this circle. So it'll do 300 degrees all the way around, and it will make 3 spaced out at 150 degrees, which is what we said. Now, you may happen to know that 300, or, well, if you have 300 degrees, and let's say we want to divide it evenly, amongst that 300 degrees, 300 divided by that would be 100. Those would be each at 100 degrees. Or actually, what would it be? It would be divided by 2, because you would have this angle and this angle on this whole section, because these are nodes. So let's try 300 and then 150. Yeah, there you go. So 150 will basically from here split this up into 2 equal angles. This angle to this angle. It would be completely split up. You can actually add rows to this, so I'm going to go ahead and add 6 again and give it the full 360 degree span. And yeah, if you actually have too big of an angle, it'll reset. So I'll just put like 1000 and it'll reset to itself where it does the math there that I talked about. So these rows are going to be from a polar coordinate system, the lines of each concentric circle. So it'll be a bigger concentric circle. So if we had 3, it will extend these out from each other. It won't evenly space them the same way. It will extend them the same way. Now, the same way, you can change the distance between the elements, or you can click and drag the elements themselves, or this little arrow, you can change the, get out a bit, you can change the angle between them, all by sliding or by exact numbers. The levels is the z-axis, so I'm not going to go about that again. The base point is here. If I wanted to select it as being here, it will just change where all this stuff is getting referenced to. And what's cool about that, with this specifically, you see if I change that to like over here, it's like making it spiral in a weird way. Well, the reason for that is because it will take my line or my reference point that I've selected, and it will be perpendicular right out from the radius. And then it will continue to copy them in that direction. So of course, if I have this point from here and I change it over to here, of course it'll go straight out because it'll follow that line. The base point, a bit more particular in this example compared to the rectangular, is that it will follow that point. It'll follow from that point to this point and create a line and follow that for the array. The direction is pretty simple. You can see with this little arrow here, it will change the direction of rotation, and if you want to rotate the items or not. You can close that. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, we are almost getting to the first tiny drawing that we'll do, and then we'll be able to finish up with this video, take a break for everybody, and then have another week until the next one comes out, or the next set. So the next one we'll do is pretty straightforward. Let's say I make, for example, a rectangle, and I wanted to fillet it. No, not that one. I wanted to fillet it. And the option I wanted to select was, if you remember how we did it with the chamfer, it's the same thing with this. So first, we will figure out what's a good size. Probably, we can do 0.75 again. That would work. So we will do fillet, radius 0.75. We already selected that from before. Second option, we'll do polyline. It will do all 4 at once, just like the other one. So offset is a tool that allows you to basically take what you have and scale it, but it's a specific scale. It's a scale around the center, the exact center that it can find, the center of mass, perhaps, the calculated center that it'll find. So you click that, and you'll see that you have options. You have through, erase, and layer. Through just means that when you click it, it will allow you to drag through and see how you want them, and the other ones can do other things. But the thing it'll ask you first is to specify the offset distance. So let's say 0.5, or let's do, yeah, 0.5, why not? So we'll do enter. Then it'll ask what the offsets. You click it and it'll offset. So it has scaled this, but it has done math to know that the scale, the number representing scale is enough to make this distance 0.5. You can do it on the inside or the outside. And you can keep going until you click escape and it gets out of the tool. What does this through do? If we were to do offset, we could have this. So as you see, it says specify offset distance or in the following options. So if we do through, we can select this and then we can just drag to reference geometry or to wherever we think is cool. You can also do multiple, which will basically allow you to do multiple like we just did, but it's kind of involved already to do that. You can also do layer. You can enter a layer option for the offset objects, which basically means you can select a layer for all these things to be dumped into. We'll do layers at the very end of this video, so by the end of this video, you'll basically know all the tools, and then we can just do drawings, which are a bit more simple because once you know the drawing tools, you can just make what you have to make, and it's much more simple that way because there's no explanation really needed. Anyhow, I'll do layers later. Layers later is what we will do. That's offset. The remainder of these will be this. So this is lengthen. Let's say you have a line, right? If you want to change the length, you could click lengthen, and the options are delta, which means by how much you want to add. You can scale it by 1%. You can give a total distance or dynamic. Dynamic means you can just grab it and select, as you might expect. You can do delta, which will be the amount to add. So let's say I want to add 1 inch to this. It will add 1 inch to there. Let's say I want to repeat that, and I want to do 1%, and I click 75%. It's like scale, but for a line. I'll do that. Now, I'll be honest, this is not a super useful tool because if you look at this, you rarely have to scale things like that. And if you need to extend it, you can just grab the points and just extend it to wherever, which is much easier and much more realistic to do. Now, it's actually funny if you do that because if you're dragging a tool, you can actually right click and you can do it by stretch or lengthen, which is exactly what we just did. So it's all the same, but you can basically just do it by clicking the grips and moving it manually. I'll do the same thing. Then this is going to be edit polyline, edit spline, edit hatch, and edit array. Those are all the same menus and everything that you have already seen for how to edit arrays and other stuff. Like when we click this array up here, it will pull up this menu, but if I go to modify array and I click this, it's basically a worse version of what you already had. It's just all based on code. Now that's my personal preference. If you like to click rows and then ask you how many rows and you'd rather do it that way, then by all means, if it's comfortable for you, do it. But personally, I think the graphical user interface is better. But whatever you guys like, it won't stop you from making the correct drawing. So then you have Polyline. They're all like that, where it's just that little side cursor menu compared to the graphical user interface. So we're going to do a couple more. We're going to do some of these, and that's it. Those will be much quicker. So let's say you have a rectangle, a long boy, and then you have another rectangle, a little bit bigger, not so lanky. So if you wanted to use this tool, a line, it will basically allow you to move it in a very specific way. So you can click this and that, and then you selected them. The first source point, if you do a single point and then enter, it will basically just, well, actually, no. Okay, so we're only going to select this one. My bad. we'll do a line. If you do a single point, it basically just moves it. What's cool about this though is if you do 2 points, it can actually effectively rotate it. So let's say I do this. Now it'll ask if it wants me to scale it from this length to this length. In this case, I don't care for that, but I would like it to move it to there, so I don't want it to scale. But let's say I did. If I did want to do that, I could just, okay, we're just going to go here then. Align. I'll align this. I'll align this, and if I align it to a smaller rectangle and I ask it to scale, it'll make it smaller. That could be certainly useful if you want to scale, rotate, and move all in one command. Now, it's a bit limiting because you are drawing 2 lines and it figures out the rest instead of you putting in a bunch of specific numbers. But if you can make this work as best you can for yourself, by all means, go for it. So if we go to modify now, we'll go to the rest of the tools. This one is called break. If I wanted to go here, select this line, and then click, it will actually break a line. Like, it'll basically draw a line and then trim it away, if that makes sense. And I'll be honest, this is not super useful. I've not used this very much, but what is kind of useful is if you use the one adjacent to that, which is the break at point. So let's say I drew a line, right there. And I wanted to take this whole segment and I wanted to break it at that point. Well, as exactly as you might expect, you would select the object and then a point, and then you'll see these are 2 separate entities, which is awesome because sometimes you need to edit a part of a drawing instead of the whole drawing. So the other parts you're going to have here are going to be, what do we have? We have join. We used this earlier when we showed explode. So let's say I have these 2 and I've finished editing one of them, and now it would benefit me to connect them again. So if we click join after selecting them, it will make them all one whole thing again. Join, trim, explode, and split are also pretty good. Well, maybe not split. Break at point. You can call it split. It's the same thing, but they're really useful for sure. Reverse direction. This reverses the direction of a line, polyline, spline line. It really isn't super useful because we're not dealing with directional lines so much. We're dealing with just regular lines. If they were like rays, like I showed you over here, if they were like these rays or the construction line, which is an infinite ray on both directions, then that might be more important, but we're not really going to use that much. The only other thing, finally, we're almost done with modify. I have one more tool that we're not even going to use, but I'm going to tell you what it is. When you have layers, which I'm about to go into, you have a lot of things that are on top of each other. Like imagine if you put a bunch of pieces of paper on top of each other. Some parts might poke out, some parts might not. Well, what these will do is if you select one of those quote-unquote pages, you can actually take it out of the stack and move it upward so you can see it above other things. That's what this means. Bring to front, send back, above objects, under objects. That's what that does. Okay, so we're going to do layers, and then we're going to do a very, very quick drawing, but that one's actually kind of great. So just stick with us for that. We've got maybe a couple more minutes, and then we'll be done with all this. You know, it's good. It's good to be good with all this stuff, but, you know, it's also a very long video, so, yeah, hooray. So we'll do layers now. So these are all on the same layer. You can see that from this. Layer 0, and you can definitely see that when you click this little light bulb, and that can turn the layer on or off. It'll ask you, hey, you're working on this layer, do you really want to turn it off? And I'll say, heck yeah, I do. I don't want to see all this. You can also bring it back on. You can lock the layers so you can't actually edit them at all. So basically it'll just lock it. You can do all that, but what's valuable is all of the stuff we have here is based on lines, right? So these lines, you can make them thick lines, you can make them dotted or dashed with patterns, you can also make them different colors, but maybe you don't want all of your lines to be the same kind of thing here, so how do you change that? Well, layers is your answer. So before I do this, I don't like how this is right here, so quick tip, you can actually just move the origin by grabbing it and dragging it, which is pretty cool. Before we do layers though, there's this thing called line weight, which is how thick a line is, and you won't actually see it unless you do the following. If you go down here, you have to click line weight, and you'll see on my thing there, it'll, near the snaps, it'll come up and go. You want to click that, and you want to show the line weight. Otherwise, you won't even see that you're changing anything for line weight, and that's like defeating the purpose of having line weight. So what we'll do is we'll go to layer properties, and we'll make 2 layers, I guess. Let's do that. You can make as many as you want and call them whatever you want. I'm going to call this one thick line, and I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to call it dotted. You know what? Dashed line. Nice. So what we're going to do is, it's nothing too complicated. It's just those couple properties, and then you can, you know, adjust them and change them from here as well in the layer properties. So for the thick line, what do we want to do? I want to make it red, so I'll pick red. I'll do a dark red. Why not? The line type is continuous, and you may be thinking there's no lines here, but you can load lines. So you can search for them, but honestly, it's not super necessary to do that. What I'm going to get for us is, since we're honestly working in a really small space, we're working in like a matter of like inches, we're going to want to go down here to these 0.5 ones because they're going to be much smaller. They're going to be scaled down for us. But for bigger ones, you could use the 2x or 1x. If it's not stated, it'll be 1x. So let's take a look. We will do a dashed line 2x. My bad. We will do a dashed line 0.5x. There, dashed 0.5. And we'll click that for this one. Oh. Okay, so that'll be continuous. My bad. And this one will be dashed. Whatever you load inside of a single project will all be in the loaded section. So, yeah. So we'll make the dashed one. We'll make that purple. By the way, these are going to be really bright colors. These are going to be a little bit more dulled. You can see they're almost the same. They're just bright and dull. So this will be dashed. This will be continuous. I'll leave this one. I'll change its line weight to maybe like 20 or 0.20 millimeters. And I'll change the thick one like way up here to like 0.60 millimeters. Now, like I said, all these are in the 0 layer. So what's really cool is what you can do is, you're like, how do I get something in a layer? Well, you just select lines and then you change the layer. That's pretty cool. So let's say I want all of these lines. I want this under the thick boy line. So we'll do thick line. See, it'll change the line weight to be really thick and that same color. Now, whenever you change this under layer properties, all of the layers, or everything in that layer, will change to that specification. You can see if I drag this elsewhere here, you can see I can hide it. I'm in 0 right now, so it's not asking me if I want to hide the layer I'm working in, because I'm not working in that one. But let's hide this for just 1 second. Let's say I want to go down to this line here, and I want to make this one dashed. So you'll see now this is a bit thicker than your regular line. Well, shoot, maybe we want it a bit thicker. So let's not go there. Let's go here and do 0.3. You'll see it just got a little bit bigger. This is really helpful because some lines you want to be construction lines. Now, don't confuse that with this construction here. because that's not like an actual construction line. Don't worry about that. That's like a grid structure line. You want a construction line, which are usually dashed lines that indicate something specific, like, oh, this is a center, here's a crosshair that I drew through it. And sometimes you might want to be able to turn those on and off. So what you could do is, to draw on one of these, you could just switch into the layer up here, draw whatever you want to draw. You can draw literally anything. It'll just change how it looks. Like that. And then from there, yeah. So from there, then you can go to the same thing, turn it off. Yes, I want to hide what I'm working on. Hide the other layers. And you can hide specific things and have them look different. Now, when you're doing complicated drawings, that can be really helpful, and the biggest thing that that's helpful for is using dimensions. Is you can make a layer called dimensions, and you don't have to change it to be crazy, but you can basically hide dimensions at will. So you don't have them all over your drawing. You can hide them and make them a bit more discrete. So we have some here, right? Let's make one called dimension. We'll just say dim. And actually, I don't want that, so I'm going to delete this layer. I'm going to copy layer 0. I should be able to copy this. Well, let's see if I can just Control C, Control V. That's unfortunate. Okay, so I think if you're selecting it and you copy, it will, yeah, it'll make one under it that's identical to it with a different name. So for this one, we'll just do dimensions, and it will be the same as the regular layer. Let's get these here, that, and let's stick those bad boys in dimensions. So now if I'm in layer 0 and I want to turn off dimensions, I can turn them off super easy. So that's all there is with that. The couple tiny other things. One of the things that you can also find in this menu is your, where is it? Your units here. You can find them here. It'll changes the structure of how your units are going to be arranged, how they're going to be structured. So like it might come with like inches and feet instead of just like a bunch of inches. You can also, a big one is properties. This is really evident to see with the line weights and everything. If I click this line and I right click and do properties, this menu comes up. Or if I just click this little fly down for properties and I click this line, it'll update to that line. It'll tell me what its line weight is. This is by layer, so whatever the layer dictates. The scale of the line weight, the color, line type, the layer name, everything. It'll tell you everything about it, and that'll tell you a lot of things about other stuff too. So you can look up, there's a circle here. Oh, it'll tell you some of the information about it. It's really helpful to know those. Well, you notice it was actually 2 that I had selected and it was confused, so it gave me the basic stuff, the layer varies and all that. What if I just select this? Well, it'll tell me all this stuff, and it'll actually give me some geometry information about it. Its XY position, its radius, circumference, diameter, all that. In case you need to look those things up, that's where you can find all of them. Okay, so 2 more little tidbits, and then this whole little video too, which will probably be broken at this point into 3 videos, will be finished. So the first thing is we have been working in inches this entire time. So let's say we want to work in metric. So we want to work with millimeters or whole meters or any other length. So you can go to drawing utilities, and amongst other things you can find here, like properties and whatever, you can go to units. When you click that, it will tell you, in this case we have inches, and you have all of these. Even if you feel like using micro inches, whoever is crazy enough to do that, you can work with that you can use light years. Honestly, you can even use parsecs. If you're trying to go Star Wars, you can do parsecs. Something out of a science fiction, how about gigameters? Why not? So you've got all these things that you can use. You have a lot of different things that are possible. The other thing to note is the type will be here. You'll notice this is the same as down here. So if I go and I change this to architectural and I do OK, this will also change to architectural. So I can change this back to decimal. And I won't be able to change units down there. I don't believe so. There's certainly not a thing for it. The only units thing I can change is down here. But I can change the actual type of units I'm using. You can also check what you want to do for an angle. So you can do radians, g-radians, surveyor units, degrees, minutes, seconds. And the last thing for this is precision, which means once you do it, if you put in maybe 6, it will follow by a bunch of zeros. If you do 6.75, it will, if you had 3 or 4 zeros, let's say 4, it'll have an extra 0. 6.750. It'll show you all of those. And that's useful because if you have 3 point, a common one, not 3 point, but if you have an eighth, right? Something is an eighth of an inch. Okay, you might need that for something you're modeling or whatever it might be. 1/8 converts to, in decimal, 0.125. Now, if you have this in precision 0.00, you'll see not 0.125, but 0.13. Now, that could be misleading, so to make sure, it's always helpful to have extra units to show what you want, but maybe not too many if it's too much. Okay, so we've done units. The last thing, and I promise, the last thing are snaps. Now we did snaps, but there's something called snap lines, which is really great. So you may have seen me using them earlier. Let's say I make a circle. How about no? Let's do a rectangle. I didn't say it explicitly until now, but these green dashed lines are reference lines. In some cases, you'll have these here. These are based on polar stuff. So let's make this. That's based on this. That's where this comes from. But if you have, let's say I have a line, and just to make sure I'm using all of them, I'll turn on nearest. Actually, yeah. So let's say I make a line, and I'm going to go from here. Well, it'll do that as a snap, but something else is really cool. You can go to a snap, and you can actually go away from it. And I think it just does it in 90 degrees, but you can go straight away from it and kind of create one. And once you've done it a little bit, it can kind of like snap itself to that and it'll remember it. Like if you go away from it, it won't remember it. So like if I do it again, it won't know because I haven't loaded it. So if I load it and I have 45, so I can line up 45 to that, and it's an intersection, and I've just made a point. If I go here, and you'll notice, if I make a line, this will snap both, this will snap here to the midpoint, and if you were to measure, that would be exactly 90 degrees, and you know it's 90 degrees because you've done that. You can also see that this is 45 degrees. And the reason that is because I went exactly half over and I went exactly half up. I went 45 degrees and I snapped it to the midpoint. This line, meets up with the center here. I've just made a house. This is what you can do with AutoCAD. This is the power of AutoCAD, strictly making crappy houses. So that's the end of doing modify here. I'm going to stop the video here. I've got something for the next video, a couple things planned up, but for now, we'll just stop because we've done so much already, and we all are probably a little bit tired of all this AutoCAD, so we'll take a break and come back next week, get some more information and figure out exactly how drawings are efficiently made and how you can really just conceptualize how to do those things. So thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you guys so much. You're all awesome. Thank you for sticking with it. And we will see you next week. So cheers.